Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was February 4th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. We have so many documents to choose from due to the huge abundance of paper in the 14th century Crown of Aragon and the amazing digitization effort carried out by the Archive of the Crown of Aragon in the last 20 years. Let's begin today's document. Folks, today's document knocked my socks off. This is why I'm doing this project, and we're in February, and if I had just stuck with January, I wouldn't have found this. So there is an advantage to my method. There's still flaws, disadvantages, but oh my gosh. Okay, this is wild. I didn't have a February 4th document lined up from like another secondary source or anything. I didn't have the document for today already chosen when I recorded yesterday's episode. And I just had this desire to go back to the secret seal documents for Joan because I had a Violante document already chosen for tomorrow. So I kind of, as much as I can, like to alternate them. So I'm going into one of the secret seal registers that I had used before. And I find I'm just kind of looking at the end of the letter to try to ascertain, okay, is this date even close to the date that I'm looking for the document of the day? And generally looking at a couple words in the letter to get a sense of what it's about. I noticed that it was a letter from February 4th. We've got a minim situation there where it's just 4 short strokes. That's how they did Roman numeral 4 instead of what we do today. When we do Roman numerals, we do an IV, but they didn't do that at this time. They wrote 4 I's in a row. All right. Then I look down to see who the addressee was, and I see Comte Fuxen. And there's a macron there. I can't quite figure out what the macron is standing for, but this is clearly the Count of Foix. So that's Foix. And the Count of Foix-Béarn was Gaston Febus. And I've talked about Gaston Febus in a previous episode. He is quite the towering figure in the politics and culture of the border zone between France and Iberia at this time. The biographer of Febus, one of the recent biographers, Richard Vernier, who wrote a fantastic book about Gaston Febus, called him the Lord of the Pyrenees. So he's really the most politically powerful person in that zone, that border zone between Iberia and France. And he's also a cultural luminary. He wrote what has been probably the iconic book about hunting in the late Middle Ages, the Livre de la Chasse, the Book of the Chase, which has had some amazing illustrated copies produced in the time around when Gaston Febus was around, and I think shortly after his death was the one that was illustrated by, I think, the same people that did the Très Riches, the one that was commissioned by the Duc de Berry. And I think the Duc de Berry might have commissioned this other illustrated manuscript. I'm digressing, but basically we've got some magnificent illustrated manuscripts of the book on hunting by Gaston Febus. Really into hunting, really into the luxurious hunting, the rituals around hunting, and the whole kind of majestic culture of it all. And the intersection between political dominance and the dominance over the natural world, that is something that Gaston Febus really epitomizes in his persona and in his writing. And I think Joan was really impressed by that and wanted to emulate it. So when I see a letter from Joan to Gaston Febus, I am really looking for this kind of desire to make more connections with this figure who he deeply admires. And so I start reading this letter, and I get into the content of it, and in the second line, this phrase pops out: contra nostra persona propria, against our own person. So there is something that Joan is saying here about some kind of action that was taken against him. And we can think of Kantorowicz's whole thesis about the king's two bodies and imagine that, well, maybe Joan is talking about this in a metaphorical way, like it was something against his new government. But the word propria at the end of that phrase makes me think that no, there was something done that was against himself, like his own personal body. There was some kind of attack on him, or at least like a political maneuver against him himself. But it sounds so personal when we add that word propria after contra nostra persona, our person, our own person. So I immediately got intrigued by what is being referred to in this letter, and I kept on reading, and then the next line, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe this. The next line mentions the same guy that Vullats was talking about in her letter that we talked about yesterday. She sent Gerau de Vullats to Navarre, to Charles III of Navarre, saying, I'm sending this guy. What he tells you, you need to give it the same amount of credence as if you heard it from me directly. And now Joan is sending the same person, who's also referred to here as an alguazir, but we have another word added in, lieutenant d'alguazir. So it's sort of this riff on that title of alguazir yesterday that we didn't see. So why is Joan calling him the lieutenant d'alguazir and Vullats just calls him the alguazir? I don't know. I think it speaks to some of the looseness of these job titles, but that's beside the point. The point is that we see Joan and Vullats once again working in tandem. Is every royal couple doing this? I just don't think so. Where we see this level of cooperation where it's literally they're sending the same person who speaks for both of them. It's got this incredible symbolic resonance. There's this one guy, Gerau, and he is going to Navarre and he vocalizes Vullats, he channels Vullats, and the same guy is now going to go to Gaston Febus and is going to channel Joan. So it's just this, I don't even, I'm verklempt. I don't even know what to say about this other than it's just got this resonance for me that I'm just completely excited about it. And it took me like a second it was just so serendipitous that I found this particular letter in conjunction with yesterday's. Oh, this project. It's charmed. I'm telling you, it's charmed. Oh, one detail before I forget. You might be wondering, how can this Gerau person be in two places at once? He's going to Navarre and vocalizing Vullats, and then he's going to the land of Gaston Febus, which I think would be the capital of that Foix-Béarn territory, which is Orthez, today in France. And so how can he be in Pamplona in Navarre and Orthez in Foix-Béarn at the same time? Well, he's not going to be there at the same time. If you look at the geographical relationship between these two places, Navarre, Pamplona, is on the way. If you're journeying northward, you can go from Barcelona to Pamplona, generally, and then you can go through one of the passageways through the Pyrenees and get to Orthez afterward. So basically, Gerau has an itinerary. He's going to first stop in Navarre and vocalize Vullats for Charles III, and then he's going to go to Orthez and channel Joan for Gaston Febus. And there's more. We haven't even finished with the wildness of this letter, because in line 2, there was a word that I couldn't figure out because of the paleographical challenge. So before the phrase contra nostra persona propria, we have two words, and they both seem to start with the letter C, although the letter C is written differently in the initial letter for both these words. The word right before contra seems to be cameses, so something like carried out. All right, and then the word before that I was really struggling with because the first letter is a C, and then it looked like the second letter was like another C. But one of the keys to recognizing the letter R is there's always like this little curl that comes up at the bottom of the R. And I mean, not always, but a lot of times when it's in the middle, especially when it's in the middle of the word. And so there's also more of a curl at the top. So it's almost like when you see the letter R in the middle of a word, it almost looks like the way today we write the letter C. And then it gets connected back to the letter beforehand at its top on the left side of the character. So we have CR, and then we've got a bunch of minims again. So is it an M? Is it an N? It's an M. It's an IM. And that is CRIM. And in medieval Catalan, crimes or crimes, that is a cognate for the English word crime. So there were crimes against Joan himself. There was a crime carried out, and a crime can be a word for like an attempted murder. So it's not just like, some kind of shenanigan or like someone was rude. A crime is a word that's used for serious attacks. So somebody carried out some kind of attack on Joan. And I'm telling you, like, I've not encountered information about this before. I've read quite a bit about this initial period. I think I've read everything there is to read about the first months of first months of this year, 1387, and Joan and Vullats. The only thing that comes close is this notion that develops that Sibylla had carried out some sorcery and caused Joan to fall ill. That is something that we're going to see in some letters later on this year. It's something that I think maybe they're verbally talking about but not writing down. It's something that is connected to the way Vullats writes about this time period when she's writing about it later, especially in a document that Josep Roca found from April. And it seems that there's some other documents out there that I haven't seen cited in the secondary literature but are referred to in the secondary literature, and those documents are the basis for this idea that people around Joan and Joan himself concluded that Sibylla or someone in her employ had carried out a curse, had put a curse on Joan, and that's why he became so ill in the early weeks of January 1387. So this crime against nostra persona propria could have been that. It could have been someone that Joan thinks put a curse on him. But in the first line, I didn't even talk about the first line, I'm kind of working backward through the text here. It starts out with the addressee, Comte de Carcosi, the count, cousin, most dear cousin count. So I'm not quite sure there's an actual blood relationship that connects Gaston, Febus, and Joan, but there might be. So he starts out the letter, most, or not, we don't have most, it's just dear cousin count. And then the letter begins, per una persona que se absentada de aquesta ciutat per alguns crimes, and we talked about the crimes. So the letter starts, there is somebody who has left this city. Somebody has fled Barcelona. And I'm sending Gerau to fill you in on the details. And he is possibly going to be in your, this is later on in the letter, he's possibly going to be in your land, and you'd better apprehend him, please. So this is just bonkers. Like, I'm really wondering who this person is, and why wouldn't Joan put his name in writing? That's an interesting question to me. So there's just this next level feeling to today's document for so many different reasons. There's the working in tandem between Joan and Vullats through this person, Gerau. And then there's also just, what is the crime that was carried out against Joan? Is it the sorcery? Or is it something else? Just don't know. And I hope I find something that reveals this later. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. I'm leaving with more questions than I arrived with too, by the way. If that's you, if we share this, then that's the sign of some good history doing. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, including a bibliographical citation for Richard Vernier's book, Lord of the Pyrenees. It's really good. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.